So, yes, should we start?
Okay,
Yes?
okay.
Okay, so welcome everyone here and there, because we will be streaming this at some point into the whole world, because this is starting what we call, and I'm mispronouncing that I'm sure, the Mengzi lecture something. So this is Mengzi, no? This is was a disciple of Confucius, which of course everyone knows, whom I may also mispronounce. But we are dedicating this to him, and what we want to achieve with this, which is more important, is we want to discuss the future of psychology and the cognitive sciences in a very broad sense. Because nowadays many things are changing for everyone in the world, in particular in China, and no one really knows where the ship is going. And we want to discuss what the options are, because you are young and you have to live a longer life, we hope, and have a longer career, we hope. And you may encounter all these questions. So we have an increasing diversity. I realize that as an editor of a journal. Previously I received submissions from mid-Europe mainly, sometimes from Turkey perhaps, the US, a little bit Australia, perhaps the UK, but that's about it. So nothing more exotic. Nowadays we are swamped, every day, we are swamped by papers from all over the world. Many from China, from India, from Africa, from all these countries that never before have produced. Brazil is a new player on the field. So the nationalities of the authors are increasing dramatically, and the number of papers as well, because all these countries happen to have many, many inhabitants, and some of them are scientists, and they send us all their stuff. So, and of course this is problematic because they often do not understand the journal very well. They don't understand that what they are doing may be good, but not good for our journal because we have a different profile. So I keep explaining to them and rejecting many papers and so forth. But the fact is, we are becoming a science that is increasingly diverse in terms of nationalities, of cultures, of gender. In cognitive science, there has been a very strong male dominance for many years. All the colleagues that I knew in my discipline were basically male, greasy hair, rolling their cigarettes, sitting at home and doing stuff and not talking too much to other people, and that is dramatically changing. So what does that do to us and to our science? And especially if there are new countries, they may have different questions. They may want to have different aspects being covered by the science. They may think, oh, but society has different questions. Why don't we investigate them? So that may change the topics that we become interested in. If you go, we recently have been to Prague in a very international psychological conference, and there we see many different topics that we never heard before. I mean, the topics we know, but the research on it we don't. And so we have all these questions where we are going. Then also the problems are coming, are new. Climate change, what does that mean? Should psychology care about this? Should it address some problems? Perhaps resolve some? Wars, aggressions between people, groups, countries. Does psychology deal with that? Should it? Perhaps not. And especially, we are here working in China. Well, China is developing very rapidly, has by far the steepest curve in economics, but also in science. You see that in the number of papers being published, increasingly good quality, increasingly diverse in topics. What does that mean? What does that mean for you? Which topics will be hot in your country? How about AI, artificial intelligence? Is that interesting? Should we connect to that? How about neuroscience? Should we do something about that? Should we do more about this? And so forth. Now, this is the beginning of this series of lectures where we invite people with a somewhat different background, sometimes a very diverse background themselves in terms of where they come from, where they worked, what they have experienced. And this is our first guest. So this is Professor Niels Schiller. who is born in the north of Germany. These people are known to be rather dry and have just a tiny budget of humor. Niels is somewhat different, but if you are disappointed with respect to that, you know where it comes from. Now, he was moving scientifically relatively quickly to other countries, including the famous Max Planck Institute for Psycholinguistics in Nijmegen. That's actually a German institute that is staying and has been built in the Netherlands because the director didn't like German so much. So they said, okay, so we build it in the Netherlands. He also went to Harvard. He went to Maastricht, where he became professor first, I think, officially for psycho and neuro-linguistics, very complicated. And then he moved to Leiden, and I flatter myself that I played some role in getting him there. We actually drove to his home and tried to talk to him and convince him to come to Leiden. Me and Professor Cheng, a linguist of Chinese background, also working in Leiden. And we succeeded. So we both worked in Leiden, he at the Faculty of Linguistics for some time, for quite some time, for almost 20 years. Yes. So now he is very different. He moved to Hong Kong, and now he's the head of the Department of Linguistics and Translation. Very mysteriously sounding. What is translated, what into what, and so forth and so on, in the City University of Hong Kong. So he will stay there for some time, and obviously he not only brings a very diverse cultural and scientific background, but he also encounters a new one himself. His speciality, as you will see, is special with respect to three aspects that made him particularly interesting as the first guest for our new lecture series. Number one, he is extremely interdisciplinary. So you might say, is this a linguist, or is that a psychologist, or is this a neuroscientist? And all of that is true. Okay, so this brings together, makes the title complicated, but also his background and his interests. And he tries to give you a little flavor. We know that you're not specialists in the neuroscience of language, but he will give you a little flavor about his topic in the first part of his visit. Second, he is a psycho-neuro-linguist, and many are as well, but he is special because he is not just interested in the perception, which most people are interested in this field, but in the production. So he's a perception-action person, as I keep saying. And if you strip the language, then you can also learn from this for other purposes. You may not like to hear that, but of course language is special, but not so special. It's just one other action that happens to have a stronger social impact, I used to say. And of course his history, his background, his CV is very diverse, so he has seen many things and has been surprised by many things, and that make these three things, I believe, make him an interesting first guest. So this has two parts. The first part is where he informs us about what he is doing. To some degree, we know that this does not directly connect to your everyday work, but he tries to give you a flavor of that. And then later, in a second part, we will open up the discussion to the future and ask what he has to say about it. So, enjoy his talk, Professor Schiller.
Thank you very much, Werner, for this kind and interesting introduction. I never had an introduction like this before, so thank you very much. Yeah, maybe to add a little bit on what Bernard already told you about me, when I was at high school, for example, I wanted to do, after high school I wanted to study sciences. So I was thinking about doing biochemistry or chemistry, something like that. Then I went abroad. I went to Spain and France for a year and learned Spanish and improved my French, and then I thought, no, this is not something for me. I have to do something with languages. It's much more interesting. And I still think that languages are probably one of the most interesting things, yeah, I don't know how to say this differently, that exist in our life, and so I kept myself busy with language ever since then. I studied linguistics and especially phonetics at university. If I had to choose again, I would probably choose psychology, because I think that from this, it's better to study psychology to investigate language. But here we are. I mean, I studied linguistics and phonetics and then became more interested in psychology while I was doing my PhD at the Max Planck Institute in Nijmegen, and read up on psychology and psychological theory, and now I'm a psychoneurolinguist. And today I'm going to talk about something that has grasped my interest already for more than 20 years, and that is a very small grammatical features in languages that you especially find in European languages, but in other languages, like for example in Mandarin Chinese, you have very similar features. So in European languages we call them grammatical grammatical gender. In Chinese you call them classifiers. They work, as I hope to convince you, they work very similarly, and I will show you why I'm interested in those. Okay. So here's an overview of my talk. Oh, something happened to the title. That looks interesting. So this is a conversion problem. Sorry about that. I have a Macintosh computer with me, but I forgot my adapter, so that's why we had to transfer the talk to the Microsoft system, and some things got screwed up. But never mind. So first of all, I will try to bring us all on the same page and tell you something about the skill of speaking. Then I would like to show you some psychological or psycholinguistic evidence for the processing of grammatical gender. Then probably I will not have time to get into the field-based psycholinguistic part, so I probably have to skip that. But then I do want to tell you also about classifier processing in Mandarin Chinese, and also about a little bit about morphosyntactic features in L2 processing, so in second language processing. L2 stands for second language. Okay, so I'm aware that you probably do not know too much about language processing and linguistics. Am I right? Yeah, probably that's true. So what I'm starting with is this model. It's a model of speech production that has been developed by my PhD supervisor Pim Lefeld and his group ever since the 90s. Pim is retired now, but some people still work on this model. It's a model of speech production that starts with a what you see here, conceptual representation. So think about the situation that you want to convey a message, that you would like to ask a question, that you would like to express a feeling, whatever. You want to produce speech for whatever reason. Okay? So what you do is you start up here and build a concept of what you want to say. Then the next step is that you have to come up with a so-called pre-verbal message, that you have to do some syntactic encoding, so that you have to look for example, for word order and other grammatical phenomena. But then you also have to choose words, right? And you choose words from your mental lexicon. That's the lexicon where you have all the words and their meanings in your mind. But when you have selected a word from the lexicon, you still have to do some more work on that word. You have to encode it. So you have to phonologically encode it, you have to segmentally and prosodically encode it, You have to syllabify the word, and you have to get to the gestural scores and do some phonetic encoding in order to actually be able to articulate the word. Because as Bernard said, speaking is just a motor skill, basically. So what we do is we move our jaw and our lips and our tongue in order to produce speech. But we have to plan this. So we have a motor plan that's being executed, and then we are able to move. It's just like throwing a ball or walking, or you have to practice this. You know, and when children are born, they cannot speak. They have to practice this as well, and it takes them approximately a year before they can utter actually the first word, and then they become gradually better. But it takes not only a year, and before people really can speak fluently, it takes them 4 or 5 or even 6 years before they are able to speak full sentences. So it's a long learning curve. Okay, so it's a motor skill, but that motor skill is there's a lot of planning that has to occur before we are able to execute that motor skill. And I'm interested in just some little features of words, so little characteristics of words that are somewhere, that are located or represented in the lexicon and that have to do with syntactic encoding. I'm so confused. Okay, so here's some facts about speaking. So as I've already shown you, the architecture of the production system is quite complex. And speaking or speech production is a very skilled but also a taxing cognitive task. So it takes a lot of cognitive effort to actually produce speech. So every time I have been given a lecture, it's really exhausting, and then I'm exhausted afterwards. And this is not because the speaking itself is so exhausting, but because the speech planning is very taxing. There are approximately 40 different muscles involved in producing speech, and it has been estimated that every 5 milliseconds one muscle event is executed. So it's a very complex and multidimensional action that we carry out while speaking. Nevertheless, speech production is amazingly robust, and we only make relatively few errors while we are speaking. Okay, especially when we are speaking informally with our friends. Okay, so how do we investigate speech production in the lab? What we usually do is that we present a stimulus, for example, the picture of a chair, and then we ask people to name this picture. And we can ask them to just say chair, or to say the chair, or the big chair, or the big black chair, whatever. So we can manipulate the task, but then we just present the stimulus, and we have the rest is up to the participant. Now, of course, we are interested in the speech planning process that takes place in our brains, but we cannot get directly to the speech planning, because we can manipulate this and we can measure this. Okay, so this is the response. So, for example, in Dutch, this would be stoel, a chair, but we cannot directly get at the speech planning, which is, of course, problematic, but also interesting. That makes it interesting. And speech production is a very fast process. It only takes about a little more than half a second to name an everyday object. So, and there are lots of processes being carried out. If you think, I mean, when you present a stimulus, first the participant has to visually recognize the stimulus. It has to go all the back to the brain, to the visual cortex. Has to be recognized. Then the activation has to go to the lexicon, and so on and so forth. So and then there's of course also the motor execution part, which probably only leaves about 200 milliseconds for the actual speech planning. Okay. Now, there are lots of debates going on in speech production research. For example, how many steps are actually involved when we go from concept to lemma to lexeme, and The time course of activation is also being discussed, and whether lexical decision, for example, is by competition or by exclusion. These are all things that I will, or all questions that I will briefly touch upon in the rest of my presentation. So, speech or picture naming is interesting because you can, as I said, you can vary it to some degree. So, for example, when you have when you present a picture like this, and you ask people to say something like the red chair or de rode stoel in Dutch, what you can investigate, or what people have to do is actually they have to select grammatical or syntactic information, such as gender, because determiners, like this word here in Dutch, this is a determiner or an article, they are dependent, the form of the determiner is dependent on the gender, the grammatical gender of the noun referent. Okay, so in this case, stoel in Dutch has common gender, and therefore it's de rode stoel. If you had a book, book would be neuter in Dutch, then you would say something like het rode boek. Okay, just because book has a different grammatical gender. So the form of the article depends on the gender of the head noun. So what does that mean? That means that you can use these noun phrases, as they are called, to investigate the selection of the syntactic features of the noun. This is very important. So I will repeat this once more. So because you have to select the syntactic gender of the referent of the noun in order to be able to produce the right form of the determiner, you can use these to investigate the selection of these grammatical features. Okay? Everybody got that?
You understand that gender means male or female.
Yes. Exactly.
So the chair and book and gender.
Yeah, that's a very good question. That's a very good question. I come to that later on, and maybe we can also discuss this, because of course the question is, one question that intrigued me from a linguistic or also cognitive perspective is, why do languages have gender, right? I mean, they fulfill a certain role in terms of you know, agreement. Yeah, they have to agree in gender, but that cannot be the full reason. So one possibility is that languages developed gender in order to bring more structure into their nominal system. So they have, you know, you have all the nouns in the lexicon, but they are all different. Now you would like to subdivide them, right? And one possibility is that languages said, okay, we tried to do this. How could we do this? Well, well, I mean, this is of course something that is not done without, and it's not intentional, right? But that languages develop gender, so to have like masculine, feminine, and neuter, okay? And some languages even have more different genders. So there are languages, like African languages, can have up to, I think, 20 genders. 20 different genders. European languages, which are all more or less related, usually have 2 or 3. So mostly masculine, feminine, sometimes also neuter, but there are languages that also have more different and more genders. And that each gender had a specific, was categorizing a specific type of words. So that when you were looking for a specific type of word, you could already activate or pre-activate the gender category. Yeah? This is one possibility, but this is of course speculative. There's some evidence for that when you look at earlier stages of languages.
Can you explain the gender system of the Germany to us?
Yeah.
How many genders?
Yeah, I will. Just a second. I will in a second. Yeah, I will in a second. But this is just one possibility that I would like to discuss is why languages have developed gender, and one possibility is that to subdivide or to bring order into the lexicon. Yeah. Yes.
If it is just a semantic marker, or does it bring any semantic information?
I don't think that gender is a semantic marker.
It's syntactic marker.
A syntactic marker, yeah.
Does it have any semantic information?
Yeah, but that's a good question. Whether it has semantic information, probably it was semantically motivated in earlier stages of the language, like let's talk 1,000 or 2,000 years ago. Okay, but now the semantic motivation has mostly vanished, because there's no reason why, for example, something like stoel should be common gender in Dutch, and book is neuter gender. I mean, you know, there's the semantics. It doesn't. I mean, it's just there have been too many changes in the history of language, and it has become opaque. The semantic motivation has become opaque. It's somewhat more visible, I think, in the classifier system in Chinese.
How about the first one? It's the same condition of the first word.
The de,
Yeah.
it means the, yeah. So it's the red chair, but this the has to be de and not het in Dutch. Okay? In this case. Okay, good. So maybe I just go on. So this is just to show you, as an example, a representation, a lexical representation where you have lexical concepts, lexical syntax, and the word forms of one word, namely the word Staat in German, which means state. And you have, for example, the singular form, and you have the plural form, and then you also have features like singular and plural, but also the gender feature, masculine in this case. And the when it's definite, you need a definite article, and so as you can see, and when it's singular, you need a lexical concept that says single or multiple for plural, right? So there's a very, and all these things are interacting with each other, and it's just to show you that probably for all the words we have representations. Representations like these in our lexicon, and you can also see here that there is like, but it's a bit in gray, it's a bit less visible. The word male, because masculine, of course, is related to male, but maybe we can talk about the semantic motivation of grammatical gender later on. Okay, so again, I'm interested in this part of the production system. So here you have the lexical concepts, here you have the articulation. I'm especially interested in what happens here at the lexical selection and the lemma selection. Doesn't matter. Many languages, many Indo-European languages, distinguish several different genders. There are some neuropsychological patients who are actually able to tell you the gender of objects they cannot name. So for example, when you show them this object, they would say, this patient Dante is an Italian patient, so you would say, he would not be able to say bottiglia, but he would be able to say it's feminine. Okay? So he would have access to the gender of the word, but not to the word form. And this is not only true for words that end in A, but also words that have no overt gender marker. And often people who are in a tip of the tongue state these speakers are also able to tell you the gender of words that they cannot put out. Sometimes you want to say something, but you cannot get to the word. This is called the tip of the tongue. And then when you do experiments on that, you can show that often it's the case that people know the gender of the word. So that means that there has to be a level in between the semantics, the concept, and the phonology. Because you have the semantics, you know what you want to produce, but you cannot get to the phonology. But you have information about a representation that is in between, like gender. Okay, so here is the something about the Dutch gender system. Dutch and German are very much related, but let's start with Dutch. So in Dutch, two different genders are distinguished. As I told you already, there's common gender, which is marked with the determiner de, and there's neuter gender, which is marked with the determiner het. So you have de tafel, the table, but het book, the book. Now, my colleague Herbert Schlieffers was the first one to actually investigate this phenomenon more than 30 years ago. So what he did was to present objects and distractor words at the same time. This is a very famous paradigm in speech production research. It's called the picture-word interference paradigm, because people are asked to name the object and ignore the distractor word. Okay? Now, the distractor word is chosen such that it is either gender congruent with the object or gender incongruent with the object. So here, both the object name stool and the distractor word foot would be common gender, and here one is common, the other is neuter gender. So there are two conditions, one is gender congruent and one is gender incongruent. And it's a very simple experiment. People in both cases, they have to name just the object and ignore the word. And they always have to say the same thing. So it's always de rode stoel or het bruine boek, whatever. Yeah? And then there are always two conditions. One is gender congruent condition and one is the gender incongruent condition. And the question is, does it matter for lexical selection whether the distractor word is gender congruent or gender incongruent? So interestingly, what Harvard found in actually in a couple of experiments is that when the distractor word is congruent with the target in gender, people were able to name the object much faster, significantly faster. So this is a huge effect. Of course, we do not have a neutral control condition, so we cannot say whether it's actually a facilitative effect or an inhibitory effect, but there is a difference, there's a significant difference. And this has been coined the gender congruency effect. Now, according to Schlieffers, this gender congruency effect can be accounted for by competition in the selection of a word's syntactic properties at the lemma level. Okay? So he said so this is also called the syntactic feature account. So when you have the, so here on the right side you have the production. This is the production time course. So you first see the picture, you activate a lexical concept, the concept activates a lemma in the lexicon, and then the word form encoding starts. Now when the lemma is activated in the lexicon, there's also a syntactic feature that is activated. Okay? So in this case, common gender. Now on the distractor side, the distractor word comes in, I mean, people are, they are told not to neglect, to ignore the word, but we know that they cannot do that. Okay? Whenever you see a word, process it. Okay? Automatically. So you also activate a word form, and the word form activates a lemma, and the lemma activates its corresponding gender feature. And when these two are different, they are in competition according to Schlieffers, and therefore the production of the naming process for this object is inhibited, or there's interference. Okay, so it takes longer. So that's an interesting account. A couple of years later, Vido Lahai and some colleagues did the following experiment. They actually replicated Schlieffers' finding with determiner noun phrases. So that's what you see here. So in determiner noun phrases like head book, people were faster when the distractor word was gender congruent than when it was gender incongruent. However, when participants were asked to only name the picture without the determiner, okay, so they only say book, there's no difference between the two conditions. Now that's interesting, and this has been interpreted as, so this is called bare noun naming. So you just name the noun, not the determiner. And it has been claimed that, okay, when you do this, you actually do not have to select the gender, because you do not have to produce the corresponding article. Okay, so you do not need the gender information in order to fulfill the task. And therefore, it doesn't matter whether the distractor word is gender congruent or gender incongruent, because you just select the name of the picture. So no effect here, okay, in the bare noun naming condition. Now, it could be, therefore, there is an alternative account to the account that Schlieffers gave, because it could be that grammatical gender selection is a non-competitive automatic process, but that there is competition between different determiner forms of the distractor word and the target. Okay, so that means, so the idea is that the effect actually takes place not here at the level of grammatical features, but at the level of the selection of the right determiner. So whether you need de or het, or whether de or het are activated. Okay? And this is called the determiner selection account. Now, of course, the question is which account is correct, and there is a possibility to test this, because effects of gender congruency should only become visible when the determiner can be selected on the basis of gender information alone. So this is a condition that, I mean, so yeah, I should say this differently. So in Romance languages like Italian, for example, it's often the case that the determiner is dependent not only on the gender of the word, but also on the phonology of the word onset. So for example, masculine words in Italian are usually you say il tavolo, the table. But when you say, for example, sugar, which is also masculine, you say lo zucchero, because zucchero has a phonological onset that requires you to change the determiner from il to lo, which means that you can only select the correct determiner form after you have encoded the phonology of the word, because otherwise you don't know which determiner to use, right? So it has been argued that in languages like Italian and other Romance languages, there is a congruency effect, but this congruency effect is actually masked due to the phonological accommodation, and therefore you usually do not see them appear in the reaction times. And of course, a choice has to be made between different forms of determinants. So, for example, when you have English, you will not see a gender congruency effect in English because there's only one determiner in English. Okay, so here's just a small excursus. Yeah, here this is what I just said. So for Germanic and Slavic languages, there is on average a gender congruency effect of about 20 milliseconds. Okay, but for Romance languages, there is, what is this? Oh, now it's 2 times the, so here should be, there should have been the, it was in the original, it was, so for the Romance languages, it's about, there is, it's on average, it's 0, okay? This is interesting. I don't know why this happened, but
it may have been there, and you have copied it over it.
Yeah,
and that is
yeah. That's probably the right interpretation. Okay, but so in Romance languages, it's not there. Okay. Now, I skip this because this is an interesting study that I've been doing with a PhD student of mine in Spanish. And in Spanish, actually, we have found the gender congruency effect, but this is just for you to keep in the back of your mind. Now, let's look at the Dutch system again. So I already told you about the singular. Now, when you look at the plural system in Dutch, there are, of course, the 2 genders, but there's only one determiner with which these two different genders are marked. So you say de tafels, the tables, but then also de boeken, the books. So there is, as you can see, there is only one determiner form, which means that if you do the experiment in Dutch, the effect should be visible in the singular according to the determiner account, but not in the plural, because in the plural there's only one determiner form to choose from, so there cannot be competition, right? Whereas in the other account, in the syntactic feature account, you should find a gender effect in the singular, but also in the plural, because the gender feature is still there. Okay, so we tested this a couple of years ago by presenting pictures that are in the singular, but also we had a condition where we put 2 pictures where people had to produce a plural, such as so de poes, the cat, or de poezen, the cats. And then we were interested in whether the effect would be the same or different in the singular and in the plural. So here is the effect in the singular. So this is a nice replication of the original effect by Schlieffers. But then when we looked at the plural, There was a bit of a difference, but it was not significant, and importantly, the interaction between number, so between singular and plural, and between gender was highly significant. So this effect that we see here is statistically significantly different from the effect in the plural, which means that these data actually support the determiner account, but not the syntactic feature account. So it's more likely that the effect actually takes place at the word form level when we actually have to select the word forms that we need to produce the word form, to produce the phrase. Okay, so how do I do time-wise?
7 minutes.
Okay. So let's see. I will skip this. This is just to show you that the effect has also been replicated by other people in other labs. So here you see the gender congruent versus the gender incongruent condition. This is a German experiment by my colleague Audrey Berkey some years ago. And Audrey was also the first one to actually do some electrophysiological work on gender, and found out that with the help of ERPs, she could show that there is a time course difference in the activation of the noun and the determiner, the article, in noun phrases. I won't have time to go into the details here, but this is just to show you that there are some electrodes are actually more tuned towards the syntactic gender of the noun, and others are more tuned to the phonology of the article. This is work that I've been recently doing with a student of mine in the Netherlands, where we again looked at picture naming, picture word interference, where we also had conditions that were semantically related. So, for example, this one, caviar, guinea pig, and rabbit. So these are both also mammals. What you usually find when you do these experiments is that there is a semantic interference effect. So when you see a word, when the distractor word is semantically related to the target object, you are not faster, but you are slower. It slows you down. Why is that? Because there's competition going on. There's competition in the lexicon. Okay? So caviar or conine, a rabbit, guinea pig or rabbit, they actually activate other representations in the lexicon that are very strongly related to the target. And these representations also get activated by the target itself. And this is why semantically related distractors become so strong. Okay? Now, why do we have these conditions in there? It's just it's a very well-known effect, and we just put them in as a sort of litmus test. Okay, so if we do not find a gender effect, for example, yeah, we should at least find the semantic effect, because otherwise we know that something has gone wrong with the experiment. Okay, so in this case, what we did, we had two conditions. We had a determine a noun phrase and a bare noun naming condition. And of course, our hypothesis was that we would find an effect for the determine a noun phrases, but not for the bare noun naming. Right. We also did ERP measurements, okay? Because we knew how the ERPs looked like for, on the basis of Berkeley's work, for the gender, but not for the semantics yet. So let's see at the so these are the effects for the determinate noun phrases and for the bare nouns, and as you can see, there is a gender effect. So the gender congruent condition is always significantly faster than the gender incongruent condition. But this is only the case for the determiner noun phrases, but not for the bare nouns. On the other hand, there is a semantic effect. So the semantic related condition is always slower than the semantically unrelated condition. And this is actually true for both the determiner noun phrases and for the bare nouns. So this is very much in line with our expectations and our predictions. Now, when we look at the ERPs, here's just the statistics again. When we look at the ERPs, you can see that for the gender congruency in the determiner noun phrases, there is something going on starting from about 300 milliseconds roughly. In the window, in the time window of the N400 effect, which is approximately this time window here, this effect was actually significant. However, as you might have seen, probably not because I was too fast, as you can see here, so negativity is always plotted out. So interestingly and unexpectedly, the gender congruent condition yielded a more negative deflection of the ERP than the gender incongruent cases. And this could either be a reversal of an N400 effect, or what is actually more likely is that this is not an N400 effect, but it's a P600 effect. So the P600 effect has been known for syntactic violations in sentence processing. So it could be that what we see here, what we see actually in the ERP is actually a P600 effect. Okay, so in the interest of time, I think, how much time do I have? 0, okay. So it doesn't matter. Then I briefly tell you what in one sentence or in 2 sentences, what we found for the classifiers in Mandarin Chinese. Because we found very similar effects also with the classifiers. Now, classifiers in Mandarin Chinese have a much more semantic component, right? So they are depending, for example, on the shape of objects, or on the function, or on the animacy of objects. Okay, so there is much more of a semantic basis, of a semantic motivation for the classifier than for the gender. Interestingly, we found very similar effects of congruency in Mandarin Chinese and in the Indo-European languages that we tested. And we also found interesting parallels in terms of bare noun naming and, for example, quantifier, classifier, noun naming. Because the classifier has not, you cannot construct similar phrases as in the European languages with determiners and classifiers. So you cannot ask people to use the classifier and the noun. What you have to do is you have to ask them, well, either say 2 classifier tables or 3 classifier tables, right? Because you only use the classifier, for example, in combination with quantifiers or with demonstratives, with numerals, right? So, but we constructed some experiments that tested that, and we found basically very similar effects. So we found effects that were significant in terms of classifier congruency, but also in terms of where the effects were located in the ERP. And I think it will be interesting to see in the discussion what exactly the parallels between classifiers and classifier systems and gender systems are, and yeah, what this means in terms of for our cognition. And maybe I stop here and we can go and see whether there are questions.
Yes. Yes, thank you very much. So are there questions, comments, complaints?
Yeah, complaints.
Thank you for your